It's a real pleasure to be here. I should say to be here again in Lisbon. I would like to thank S.P.A. and my good friends, Jose George Letria and Paola Cunha, for inviting me to be here again at this seminar. It was about a year ago when I was here for the last time to discuss the challenges and the opportunities for creators in Portuguese-speaking countries, and S.P.A.'s initiative to develop collective management in these countries and to support the rights of creators in those countries. And I should say that I'm very pleased to see the work that has been going on this project, and to see that this work and the project has been progressing meaningfully and is progressing effectively. And as this seminar draws to a close, there were a number of things that I would like to discuss with you. And listening to what was discussed here earlier, or at least that was helpfully translated to me, I know that you've discussed this morning collective management. Later this afternoon, we discussed culture, the importance of culture, the fact that culture can play a role as an integrating factor, culture as a unifying factor. We need to protect culture because of these essential roles that it plays, and protecting culture means protecting creators. Protecting creators means making sure that they can live from their creations. So I would like to talk about three things. The first one is the state of collective management around the world, because it is collective management, it is societies like S.P.A., societies like many others who are here today in this room representing societies from Portuguese-speaking countries. These are the societies that protect creators and ensure that creativity continues. So I would like to discuss first the state of collective management around the world. Then I would like to discuss the situation with collective management in developing countries, the situation of collective management in developing countries generally, and in African countries in particular. And finally, I would like to draw some conclusions on what can be done to improve the situation of creators in developing markets. I would like to discuss what we can do to help creators in developing countries benefit from the same level of protection and from the same efficiency of collective management that exists in more developed markets. This is also very much relating to the digital market, how we can make sure that creators in developing countries can benefit from these enormous opportunities that the digital market offers to us, how we can help them benefit from the ability to reach global audience through the digital market. So let me start by sharing with you a few thoughts about our world, the world of collective management. As you know, CISAC is the worldwide organization of author societies or collective management organizations. And today we have 230 societies around the world. We have 230 societies that come from 120 countries. Once a year, CISAC publishes a report on all the royalties that are collected by all of our members around the world. This is a publication which is based on all the figures that are reported to us by each and every one of these 230 societies. So every year, each CISAC member, each one of these societies, reports to us how much they've collected, for which types of use, for which type of repertoire, on behalf of all of their members. And by the way, all of our societies together represent about 4 million creators around the world. So every year they report to us, we process all of this information, we consolidate this information, we consolidate all the figures, and we issue our report. And we call it the CISAC Global Collections Report. So last month, we've released our latest Global Collections Report. And that report talks about the figures of 2014, the figures of last year. This report was good news. This report was good news for our industry. The outcome that we reported on was very positive. And it was positive because after a flat year in 2013, we saw a return to growth. So between 2012 to 2013, we didn't see any increase. Collections remained more or less flat. But from 2013 to 2014, we saw a growth. We saw an increase of 2.8%. In other words, our 230 societies around the world collected together 7.9 billion euros on behalf of creators. And these 7.9 billion euros represent a growth of 2.8% over the previous year. So why is it good news? It is good news because it signals that in an economic climate which remains very challenging and very difficult in many countries around the world, our societies, the collective management organizations, have been able to grow the pie. They've been able to grow the pie on behalf of their creators. The largest repertoire in terms of royalties collections was music. So of the 7.9 billion that were collected around the world, 6.9 were collected for music content. The second largest repertoire was audiovisual, and then we had dramatic, literary works, and finally visual art. We also saw an increase and a growth in the digital market and collections for digital types of use. And that's very important because, as you know, the way in which people enjoy music and other creative content is changing. And it is moving to the digital market, and we definitely see that in the report and in the reports that we receive from our societies around the world. More and more people are accessing music and other creative content on digital platforms, so the digital market is becoming more and more important for culture and for creators. Overall, revenues from digital use, revenues that were collected by all of our societies from digital services, have experienced a 20% growth year on year, which is obviously great. And as the digital market itself is now transitioning, it is transitioning from an ownership model to an access model, we see that also reflected in the reports that we receive from all of our societies. And again, that's very important in understanding the trend of where the market is going. So people download music less and less, but they prefer to access their favorite content, music by their favorite artists. They prefer to access it more and more via streaming platforms. People access films less and less on DVDs or on Blu-rays, and they do that more and more through streaming services of audiovisual content. This is very much reflected in what our societies are doing and how they collect royalties on their behalf, and we see an increase in the income from rights that are associated with streaming, with communication, and a decrease, a sharp drop in the royalties that are collected from the rights that are associated with downloads, with copying. What I want to highlight is that although we see this very encouraging development in the digital market, digital income still represents only 6.5% of overall royalties collected around the world. Only 6.5% of all the money that is collected today on behalf of creators comes from digital services. Almost all of that, 99% of all the money that comes from digital services is for music. 1% is collected for all the other types of repertoire together, audiovisual, visual art, and so on. To me, this signals two things that we need to be aware of. The first one is that not enough money flows to creators from the digital market today, because 6.5% of all the money that is collected around the world, it's nice, but it's not enough. The second thing is that we need to make sure that all repertoires benefit from the digital market and not just music, because at the moment, the digital market is very much developing in the area of music, but not with respect to other types of creative content. And the final figure I wanted to share with you relates to the geographical distribution of royalties around the world. In other words, where in the world the royalties come from, and what we can learn from that about the situation of creators. So of the 7.9 billion that I said were collected around the world, 61% comes from Europe. So more than half of all the royalties collected around the world come from one continent, from Europe. Then we have North America, the US and Canada, with about 17% of all the collections. Then we have Asia, Latin America, and finally, Africa. The royalties collected in Africa, together by all of our societies there, come up to only 0.7% of global royalties collections. So about just over 50 million euros. So less than 1% of all the royalties collected around the world are collected in Africa. Clearly, not enough money flows to creators in Africa. And this can be attributed, in my opinion, to two things. There are two elements that we need to look at. The first one is the level of protection that creators in Africa have. In other words, how strong their rights are under the law. The second thing is the level of development of collective management in these countries, the level of development of collective management and the organizations there that are entrusted with managing these rights of creators. Which brings me to the next issue. How do we improve the situation? I think that in order to strengthen the situation of creators in developing countries and in order to improve the collective management of their rights, we need to work together. We need to work together with the creators, the societies, and CISAC. And we need to address a number of areas. The first one is making sure that the legal framework is in place. Then we need to educate the public about the importance of creativity, the important role that creators play in our society. We need to develop our society's capacities and their technical capabilities to manage rights effectively. And we constantly need to adapt to the changing market conditions. We constantly need to adapt to the market needs and provide licensing solutions that answer these needs. Last year, I said here that CISAC would be at the support of its societies when and where needed, and this is now a reality. In the past year, we've repositioned our organization, internally and externally, to address the need to be much more proactive and a proactive force at the service of creators and at the service of their societies. We've worked to instill in our team, in our board of directors, in the committees that operate within CISAC, in the creators' councils that operate under our umbrella. We've worked to instill the idea that we need to be proactive if we want to reclaim the narrative that was taken away from us by the opponents of copyright-driven policies. So this issue is now totally ingrained in our DNA, and we are rolling out an ambitious plan, ambitious policy that is focused on a targeted number of issues. So for example, in the area of visual art, we are promoting a new international treaty that would make the resale right, the droit de suite, a global right. On the audiovisual area, we are promoting the unwaivable and inalienable right of remuneration to audiovisual creators so that they get paid when their works are broadcast or rebroadcast. And this is a campaign that was launched in China just 2 weeks ago, and I'm sure you will hear about it more very soon. In the area of music, we are working on the liability of internet service providers, and we are backing an initiative which is called the Fair Trade Music, an initiative that is driven by music composers and music authors, and which is focused on making sure that these creators get fair remuneration in the digital market. In general, for all repertoires, we are pursuing different legislative initiatives that are targeted at making the digital market a much better place for creators. So we are focusing, for example, on the rights of communication to the public, the rights that allow creators to obtain remuneration in the digital market. And we are looking at safe harbor laws and laws that address the liability of internet players to make sure that they cannot abuse them to avoid paying royalties to creators. These actions are global. They are brought by CISAC in all continents. Well, almost all continents, because we don't have collective management for penguins in Africa, but almost all continents. And 2 weeks ago, just an example, I was in Beijing. We had some meetings with very high-level officials in China and with filmmakers, with screenwriters, with film directors to promote the rights of creators in China. We do the same in Geneva at WIPO when we go there for the Standing Committee on Copyright or the General Assembly. We are working with organizations like UNESCO, like the OIF. We work with many governments around the world. Our strategy to have the message driven and to have the message delivered through creators is starting to pay off. But the key to everything is collaborative work. It is collaborative efforts with the creators and with the societies. This is the only way that we can secure a better future for creators and secure culture. And it is the value of collaboration which also highlights the importance of what S.P.A. is doing to develop collective management into Lusophonic countries. I should say, and many of you will know, that last July, CISAC has organized its African Committee meeting in the capital of Angola, in Luanda. And this showed the priority that we are placing on this project that is promoted by S.P.A. to develop collective management in the Portuguese-speaking countries. During our meeting in July in Luanda, we've witnessed the signing of a memorandum of understanding between S.P.A. and the Angolan society UNAC. I'm also pleased to let you know that UNAC has become a provisional member of CISAC very recently. We are also in discussions with the Cape Verde Society, SOCA, and we hope to see them becoming a CISAC member very soon. We want to grow the business of collective management for creators in Africa in general, and in the Portuguese-speaking African countries in particular. We believe that by having strong societies in each country, strong societies that are connected through CISAC, sharing best practices, sharing knowledge, sharing data, we will have a much better overall system that works in favor of creators. Together we have the same goals. We want a system that works for creators, that processes data efficiently, that supports collection of what is owed to creators, and effective distribution to the right creators. It takes time to build that. It requires a lot of attention, a lot of effort, and a lot of investment. But it is something that we need to do as a group, as a unit, and we are certainly committed to that. I think that in today's very complex world, in the very complex licensing world that we have today, it is true that even the biggest players in the world of collective management, they do not operate on their own today. They build partnerships. They find collaborators that offer them technical solutions. The big players build coalitions that defend their interests. And they work jointly to address these big challenges that the digital market raises in the face of creators. So if you look at Europe, for example, the legal and the economic situation in Europe has brought societies to cooperate between them in order to continue to provide the best services that they can for their authors. Some societies are building back office infrastructures together, and they do that in order to deal with the huge amount of transactions that are taking place today in the digital world, and also in order to bring economies of scale. So this is happening in Europe. It is also happening in Latin America. It is happening in Asia. It is happening in North America. And this is exactly the reason why we commend all of the efforts that S.P.A. is doing to do the same and to engage in this collaborative work in the Portuguese-speaking countries. These countries are linked by the same language. You are linked by the same language, but it is very encouraging to see that you're also building these bridges among and between your societies to help each other improve the overall system for the benefit of creators. Now, doing that is a big challenge. It is also an exciting challenge, because what will come out of all of these efforts will be a better environment for creators in all your countries, and will certainly help us grow those collections I referred to earlier, the low number and the low level of collections that we see, for example, in Africa. So I would like to conclude by saying this, and going back to an earlier point that I made. I strongly believe that it is through this type of collaboration that we are going to grow the pie, and to ensure that creators get what they deserve, and that more revenues flow back to creators, especially from the online world. Thank you very much.